I think he heard what I said.
I don't know what was going through my head when I walked into the CEO's office, sat down in his chair, and started talking to Juno on the phone like that place couldn't swallow me alive. Maybe I was too tired, too irritated, or just crazy enough to forget who I was messing with. Then I laughed and said the dumbest sentence of my life. My dream is to see him without pants. The next second, I spun the chair around, and there he was, standing behind me, motionless, cold stare, expression dangerously calm. In that instant, I knew I was in trouble, but I still had no idea that the real problem wouldn't be getting overheard. It would be finding out how far he was willing to take that line. Hi, I'm Kay. A special shout out to those of you watching Book 1 for free here on the My Stories platform, completely ad-free and uninterrupted. Chapter 1. The Wrong Armchair. The alarm went off at 7:10, like always. I hit the button with the reflex of someone whose fingers already knew the way there in the dark. The floor of my apartment was cold. The coffee from the old coffee maker was the same as ever, and my best gray blouse was on the hanger, ironed the night before. I'd been living like this for 2 years. The plan was to keep living like this for at least 2 more, until the name Tessa Holloway moved up 1 line on the Devereaux Group org chart. From my apartment on 81st and 2nd Avenue to the glass skyscraper in Midtown was 40 minutes on the subway and 3 cups worth of thinking. I swiped my badge at the lobby turnstile at 8:45, took the analyst's elevator, and got off on the 41st floor, where the carpet was gray and the cubicles all looked the same. My cubicle was near the window, and that was my one luxury. I sat down, pulled up the Holden Project spreadsheet, and pretended I'd slept 8 hours. Nobody asked. Nobody ever asked. That's how I liked it. At 2:30 in the afternoon, Martin, my direct boss, stopped by my cubicle with an envelope in his hand, and that look of someone about to ask me a favor that wasn't really a favor. I need you to hand-deliver this to Devereaux, Holloway. Head up to 58. I looked at the envelope, and then at him. Doesn't 58 have an intern for this? The intern has the flu, and Devereaux asked personally. I took the envelope without arguing, because arguing with Martin was like arguing with a cactus, and headed up to the executive elevator. Martin's keycard unlocked the panel. The private elevator was silent, with a one-way mirror on one side, and I avoided looking at my own reflection as I rode up to 58. The CEO's outer office was empty. The secretary's desk had a still steaming cup and an expensive coat hanging on the chair, which I translated as a 10-minute break. I knocked on the office door. No one answered. I pushed it open slowly. The office was empty too. A half-finished glass of whiskey sat on the glass desk. His pen was out of place, fallen onto a stack of papers, and the desk lamp was still on. I figured he'd stepped out to grab something and would be back in 5 minutes. I took 2 steps in, set the envelope on the desk, and that's when I saw it. The Post's Society column was open on his tablet, on top of some documents. The photo took up half the screen. Rhett Devereaux at a Soho restaurant the night before, a brunette in a green dress laughing loud next to him. The headline was short: Manhattan's most eligible CEO swaps dates again. Friday's redhead lasted until Sunday. I stared at the screen for about 5 seconds. The same hand that had signed my performance review last month was on the waist of the woman in the picture, and then my cell phone buzzed in my blazer pocket. It was Juno, sending a photo of a latte with a heart drawn on top. She'd attached a message. Today, I didn't see a single patient without a beauty filter. Tell me something worthwhile from your week. My week had been a spreadsheet, a microwave dinner, and this photo of my boss on his tablet. I called her. His armchair was leather, one of those high-backed ones only millionaires buy so nobody feels small sitting in them. I sank into it because my legs were tired of standing since 8, rested my folder on my lap, and turned the chair a little toward the view of Central Park. The whole office was mine for 5 minutes, and I knew how to use 5 minutes. Tess, tell me you're at a bar, Juno picked up between 2 appointments, with that voice of someone who had 10 seconds. I'm in his office, Juno. The CEO's office? He stepped out. I came to drop off an envelope, and his tablet is open to a photo of him with yesterday's girl. I was fine until I saw that. Why does it bother you? It doesn't bother me. I'm offended. You know the difference. Tell me. I pressed my heel into the rug and turned the chair a little more. This man is insufferable. He swaps women like he swaps ties. Friday was a redhead. Monday there's already a brunette. I made a spreadsheet, Juno, of the names of everyone who's shown up in a photo the last 3 months. It had headers and filters. You made a spreadsheet? Juno started laughing. I needed to make sense of something in a month where I worked 80 hours. I sank deeper into the chair. This guy breathes and 3 models faint in the lobby. My dream in life is to see him without his pants, Juno. Not in a creepy way. It's pure curiosity. I need to confirm he's made of flesh like everyone else, because the way he carries himself, I'm pretty sure he's Italian marble from the waist down. Juno laughed so hard I had to pull the phone away from my ear. I laughed too. I spun the chair another quarter turn, and that's when I froze. Rhett Devereaux was standing in the doorway of his own office with his arms crossed. The collar of his white shirt was open. His half-smile didn't have a drop of kindness in it. And the time he'd been standing there wasn't 4 seconds. It was 30, at least. Italian marble. No pants. Science. Tess? Tess, why'd you stop talking? Tess. Juno repeated on the other end. I couldn't answer. I couldn't do anything but hold the phone in the air and stare at him. He uncrossed his arms, walked into the office in 3 calm steps, and held out his hand. I gave him the phone because apparently my body obeyed him before even asking my permission. He brought the phone to his ear and spoke quietly, never taking his eyes off me. Juno, Tessa will call you back later. He hung up, handed the phone back, rested both hands on the glass desk, and leaned down until he was at my eye level. When he spoke, his voice was so low I had to focus to hear it. Put it on my calendar, Miss Holloway. I have time for science. This was the point where a sensible person would have dropped dead on the rug. I'm not sensible. I stood up from his armchair with my spine very straight, set the folder with the envelope on the edge of his desk, and took one breath before opening my mouth. I was joking on the phone. It wasn't meant for anyone to hear. I'm sorry, Mr. Devereaux. He didn't answer. He just stood there, his head tilted to the side, studying me like someone who had already decided something and was waiting for the universe to catch up. I pointed at the envelope with my chin. The Holden report. Martin asked me to hand deliver it. Deliver it. It's delivered. Then you may go, Miss Holloway. That's exactly what I did. I walked across the office with my shoulders pulled back and my bag pressed against my side, because I knew that if my hand trembled, he'd notice. I went through the outer office, called the executive elevator, and only breathed properly when the doors closed in front of me. The inside of my chest was a drum. The outside of me made it to the women's bathroom on 41, pulled off its composure wig, took 3 breaths in front of the mirror and thought, I need to update my resume before 6. I managed not to cry until 5:18. At 5:20, the phone on my desk rang. The secretary from the 58th floor requested, in that trained voice that is never actually a request, that I come back up. I went up. My legs did the work because my brain was busy calculating whether I could pay February's rent without his paycheck. Rhett was in the 58th floor hallway, standing next to the main elevator door, not his office door, the elevator, like someone waiting for me. Miss Holloway, Mr. Devereaux, you've been assigned to the Lisbon project team. 9-figure contract, 3 trips scheduled, meetings outside business hours. I crossed my arms over my folder and lifted my chin just enough. Is that punishment or work, Mr. Devereaux? He took 3 seconds. I counted. It's work. The punishment I'm still thinking about. The elevator arrived behind me with the soft chime of the panel. He didn't move. I stepped in backwards because I couldn't turn my back on him, and only pressed the button when the doors started to close. He stayed standing outside until the very last inch of the gap. The doors closed. The elevator started going down. I rested the back of my head against the mirror and shut my eyes. I should have quit right then. Why am I smiling, oh my God? Chapter 2. No Microscope. I didn't sleep well. I spent the whole night waiting for a termination email that never came, and at 7 on Tuesday morning I was putting on my second-best blouse, because the first had been scorched by the previous afternoon's disaster. The conference room on 52 had floor-to-ceiling glass on both sides. I got there at 8:50. The person already seated at the head of the table wasn't Rhett. It was a man in his early 30s, thin-rimmed glasses, a flawless navy suit, leather folder open, pen in hand. He looked up when I walked in. Miss Holloway, good morning. Sullivan Marsh, General Counsel for the Devereaux Group. Pleasure. Mine. He didn't stand up, but gestured to the seat next to him with his pen and went back to looking at his laptop screen. I sat down. He didn't make small talk. I liked him immediately. At 9 sharp, Rhett walked in. White shirt, no tie, 2 buttons undone. He passed behind Sullivan, and Sullivan said something too quietly for me to hear. Rhett just adjusted his cufflink and sat down at the head of the table. He didn't look at me. Good morning, he said to the team in general. Let's get started. The remote consultant joined the call. A Lisbon architect, a financial analyst from Rhett's team, and me. The presentation started with the market data. When the currency projection came up on the screen, I looked at it twice. Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Kavanaugh, I said to the analyst from Rhett's team who was presenting. But that number's wrong. The exchange rate you used is from 3 months ago. I can show you the updated source if you'd like. Kavanaugh turned red. Sullivan suppressed a smile, and jotted something down on his pad. Rhett didn't move. He just lifted his eyes from the paper and stared at me for an amount of time I couldn't measure. "Show it," he said. I opened my laptop, projected the updated source from the Bank of Portugal, and Kavanaugh redid the calculation out loud. The difference was 2 million euros in the worst-case scenario. Nobody in the room said anything out loud, but Rhett wrote something in the margin of his paper with his fountain pen. The Lisbon Architects portion came next. He asked in Portuguese if there was anyone in the room who could confirm the city council deadlines, because his English got stuck on technical words. I answered before Kavanaugh could clear his throat. The council's deadline for historic zone projects is 180 days from the filing date. It's not the same as the deadline for regular zones. The architect blinked. He answered in Portuguese too, relieved not to be alone. "Are you Portuguese, ma'am?" "My grandmother is. I've spoken it since I was a kid." I noticed, without turning my head, that Rhett had stopped writing. When I glanced his way, he was watching me, not like someone who had caught me red-handed the day before, like someone seeing a different person. I went back to looking at the screen. The meeting ended at 10:40. Sullivan closed his laptop, gave me a nod, and left first. Kavanaugh followed, his pride bruised. I gathered my papers calmly, because I knew Rhett was waiting. He was standing near the door, one hand in his pants pocket. "Any other comments, Miss Holloway?" I looked at him without flinching. "None, Mr. Devereaux. At least not without coffee." He closed his folder slowly. I walked past him through the door. In the hallway, his voice came low behind me. "For me alone. Lunch is at 12:30. I didn't turn around. I just kept walking. Thursday, 8 at night, a black car pulled up at my building. Driver in a cap, gray suit, polite. Message, work dinner, Il Mulino. Not a request. I almost didn't go. I'd spent the afternoon staring at the one black dress I owned and arguing with myself out loud, which is always a sign of trouble. Juno had sent 4 messages in a row. Go in the black dress. Don't wear the heeled sandals that hurt you. I know you were going to wear the heeled sandals that hurt you. I wore the sandals that didn't hurt me, out of spite. Il Mulino was 15 minutes from my building if traffic cooperated. It did. The maitre d' led me to the table in the back, near the exposed brick wall, away from the door. Rhett was already there. White shirt with 3 buttons undone, no tie, dark jacket on the back of the chair, a bottle of wine open, 1 glass poured, the other empty. He stood up when I arrived. I wasn't expecting that. "Miss Holloway, Mr. Devereaux." I sat down. The waiter appeared out of nowhere, poured my wine, disappeared. The first 15 minutes were about the contract. Clauses, deadlines, my additional compensation for the project, the travel arrangements. I took notes in my little notebook, with the cramped handwriting of someone who'd learned to take notes in a Cornell lecture hall on a full scholarship and never forgot how. On the second glass of wine, he closed the folder. "Why did you accept the project, Tessa?" I stopped writing. Rhett had called me by my first name. I felt the heat rise to the roots of my hair and wished the restaurant's lighting were even lower than it already was. "Because you didn't give me a choice. There's always a choice." "Then tell me what the other one was." He went quiet, looked at his glass, then looked at me. "I wanted you close, Tessa." I set down my glass. Slowly, I kept looking at him while I organized my answer in my head, because I knew it couldn't come out wrong. "Mr. Devereaux, I'm an analyst at your company. You're my boss. What you're saying to me right now is not something a boss says. I know. Then you need to decide. Either we work together or we don't. There's no middle ground." He leaned back in his chair. The light from the wall cast a long shadow across his cheekbone. For a moment, he looked younger than he was. "I'll decide tomorrow." I shook my head. "You decide now?" "I've already decided." "And what did you decide?" "That I'm going to work on the project. And that you're going to call me Miss Holloway until Lisbon." He almost laughed. One of those almosts that stops at the last layer of the face before becoming a smile. I stood up, folded my napkin, and placed it on the table. "Thank you for dinner, Mr. Devereaux. Good night." I backed up a couple of steps until I could turn without looking like I was running, and then walked out of the restaurant at the pace my dignity would allow. I grabbed a cab at the door, climbed the 4 flights up to my apartment, closed the door, slid to the floor with my back against the wood. The problem isn't him. The problem is I want to go back there tomorrow. Chapter 3. Alfama. The Devereaux Group's private jet was parked in a separate hangar at JFK, and I had never climbed a set of plane stairs that didn't have an employee holding a tray at the bottom. At 7 in the morning on Friday, 2 weeks after that dinner I'd been trying to forget, I was doing exactly that. I climbed the steps with my bag slung over my shoulder and my economy class ticket tucked in the back of my wallet like an amulet against getting used to any of it. Up top, the flight attendant smiled as if she knew me. The inside of the jet had cream-colored leather seats and a long table in the middle. Rhett was already sitting down, white shirt, jacket on the seat next to him, an open book in his hands. I glanced at the cover out of the corner of my eye. Dostoevsky, the brothers Karamazov. Of course he was reading Dostoevsky on a jet. The other two team members sat on the opposite side of the table. Kavanaugh from finance, and an infrastructure analyst I'd seen twice in all-hands meetings whose name was Priya. Sullivan was coming later, on a commercial flight. For some reason I didn't ask about. I settled in across from Rhett, opened my laptop, and pretended for 7 hours that there wasn't anyone reading a Russian novel 3 feet away from me. The flight attendant served breakfast shortly after takeoff. Orange juice in a crystal glass, warm pão de queijo, scrambled eggs with actual seasoning. I ate with the manners my grandmother had taught me, one hand on the napkin in my lap, the other using the fork calmly, and realized Rhett was doing the same thing, the same way, as if someone had taught him the exact same way, somewhere very different from Queens. 3 hours into the flight, Kavanaugh and Priya had already fallen asleep. I opened the project spreadsheet, closed it, opened it again. Turbulence over the Atlantic made Rhett's glass tremble a little on the table. He didn't look up from the book. 7 hours in, he spoke without looking up from the page. "You're going to have to stop staring at the book at some point, Miss Holloway." "I'm not staring at the book. You've been staring at it for 6 hours. I'm working. You've had the same spreadsheet open since New Jersey." I closed my laptop. He closed his book. His bookmark was a thin strip of leather with an engraved letter, a discreet R, the kind you get as a gift from someone who's never going to give you another gift. "Do you like Dostoevsky?" I asked. "I respect him. Not the same thing." "It's not, but it's the most I can manage before landing." We spent the last 40 minutes of the flight talking about the Portuguese heritage preservation clauses, about the exchange rate Kavanaugh had gotten wrong the week before, and about a border dispute between 2 rival funds I'd followed back in college. I pretended my heart hadn't skipped a beat when he called me Miss Holloway, just like I'd asked. Lisbon greeted me with that light I'd known since I was a child, the one that falls sideways in November and makes everything look ochre. The Four Seasons was at the top of Avenida da Liberdade, facing Eduardo Seven Park. I had a 9th-floor room with a view of the Tagus and a welcome tray of pastéis de nata, all of which I ate before unpacking my suitcase, because Queen's Tessa is stronger than 58th floor Tessa. My grandmother Lourdes had sent me a voice message at 6 in the morning New York time. I listened to it sitting on the bed, my coat still on my shoulders. "My Tess, I heard you arrived. You'll see Alfama again after so many years. Walk by Rua do Paraíso, on the corner by number 17, where I used to sew. If the house is still there, take a look for me." I laid my head on the pillow and took 3 deep breaths. The Four Seasons bed was too soft to let me think straight. At 8 in the evening, I went downstairs and ate alone at the lobby bar, because Rhett had a meeting with a local investor, and Kavanaugh had gone to sleep. I went back to my room before 10, showered, exchanged the day's messages with Juno, and slept without dreaming, which was the best thing I'd done in years. Saturday, 10 in the morning, the car left the hotel heading toward Alfama, Rhett next to me in the back seat, the driver speaking Portuguese to the GPS, Kavanaugh and Priya in another car behind. The streets climbed in tight curves, the Portuguese cobblestones tracing black and white waves under the tires, and I looked out the window unable to speak, because my grandmother had worked as a seamstress 4 blocks from there 50 years ago, and that information was mine. I didn't tell Rhett. I kept it. At every curve, a balcony with laundry hanging, an old woman watching the street from inside her window, a fat cat sleeping on a doorstep, the smell of grilled fish from some half-open door. I squeezed my bag in my lap and blinked faster than I needed to. "Do you know this place?" Rhett asked, without looking at me. A little, or a lot. Enough not to get lost. He didn't push. I silently thanked him for the second time in 2 days. The Palacio Belmonte was under construction tarps, scaffolding on the blue-tiled facade, a white tarp covering the main entrance, the sound of a sledgehammer inside. The Portuguese architect, Mr. Medeiros, was waiting for us at the gate. A man in his 60s, glasses on the tip of his nose, blueprints rolled up under his arm, and the big hands of someone who'd been drafting projects for 40 years. "Welcome to the Palacio, Mr. Devereux," he said in English with a thick accent that swallowed his final consonants. "Thank you, Mr. Medeiros. Go ahead." The tour started in the inner courtyard. A broken fountain in the center, hand-painted tiles on the walls, a fig tree planted in the corner that had to be more than a century old. Mr. Medeiros explained in labored English. Kavanaugh followed along with his eyes moving and his lips sometimes repeating words, like someone translating internally. Rhett listened in silence. We entered the main hall, The ceiling was coffered, the dark wood painted with gold faded by time. Mr. Medeiros explained the conservation plan, which preserved the ceiling and tore down 2 internal walls to create a double lounge. I took notes in my little notebook. At one point, already in the east corridor, Mr. Medeiros pointed at the side facade, of dry stone, and said, "This one will tear down. It'll free up 30% of usable ground floor space." I looked at the facade, looked at the blueprint in his hand, looked at the facade again. I opened my folder and pulled out the document I'd printed in New York the night before, because I'd researched that property until 2 in the morning. "Mr. Medeiros, with all due respect," I said in Portuguese, quietly so no one else would hear, "you can't tear down that facade. It's been protected since 1998. If you tear it down, the whole project gets halted by the Lisbon Council." I brought the document. I handed him the paper. Mr. Medeiros pulled his glasses down to his nose, read it again, and the color drained from his face in 2 beats. "You're right, ma'am. I know. I'll redo the blueprint this week. Do it." Rhett was 2 steps behind me. He clearly hadn't followed the Portuguese, but from the way his eyes went from Mr. Medeiros to me and back, the architect's face had been translation enough. Kavanaugh caught it too. His eyes went a little wide in my direction, like a kid who just watched a classmate get a higher grade than his. Rhett didn't say anything in front of Mr. Medeiros. He only thanked him for the tour when it was over, shook the architect's hand with 2 seconds less warmth than he had at the start, and got into the car with me. In the back seat, with the door closed and the driver still outside, he turned to me. "You saved me a lawsuit today, Tessa." I looked out the window. "You're welcome, Mr. Devereaux. Can you go 5 minutes without calling me sir?" "No." He laughed, and his laugh was exactly what I'd been afraid of, from deep inside, whole, the kind that takes years to come out. I saw his profile in the window's reflection, a small wrinkle at the corner of his eye, his hand resting on his thigh, the kind of relaxation that arrives after a long time of never settling. The driver got in. The car pulled away. I kept looking out the window, because it was safer than looking at the man next to me. Dinner was at a restaurant in Chiado, a table for 2 on a mezzanine above the main floor, a candle in the middle of the table, a waiter who spoke English and called Rhett by name. I ordered bacalhau à brace because it was the only thing on the menu that reminded me of my grandmother. He ordered the same. "You didn't even read the menu," I said. "You ordered. I trust you." Is that laziness or charm? Both. It's efficient. I shook my head and took a sip of the Vinho Verde the waiter had poured without asking. We talked about the project, then about nothing. Then, when the nothing started to feel heavy, about the project again, because it was safer. He told me between bites that he'd learned Spanish because his mother thought any educated man should speak at least 3 languages, and that he'd given up on Mandarin at 19 because it was more honest to quit than to pretend he'd ever get there. His hand rested on the table too close to mine for too long. Neither of us closed the distance. I clocked the time because I'm a strange person. Over dessert, he asked, "When was the last time you came back here?" I thought about the answer. I went with a partial truth, which is the most well-mannered lie. "It's been a while. I was a lot smaller." "With your grandmother?" "With my grandmother." "Is she still alive?" "She is. She lives in Queens." "Good." I looked at him. It was a short, good, direct, almost a sigh, and I remembered in that second that his mother wasn't alive anymore. I didn't know the details, but Juno had once sent me an article about the Devereaux inheritance, and I'd read it on the subway. "Thank you for dinner, Rhett," I said, and it was the first time I'd called him by his first name out loud. He looked up from his glass. "You said Rhett." "I know. You asked me to call you Miss Holloway until Lisbon. We're in Lisbon." He laughed again, the second laugh of the day. I felt I was either winning or losing something, but I couldn't decide which. We went back to the hotel in separate cars. He said he had to stop by his suite to grab a document. I said I was going straight to my room. I went up, took off my heels, put on a hotel robe, ordered room service, a glass of white wine, nothing to eat. I was lying on my side staring at the wall when my phone buzzed. "Rhett Devereaux, can I come up for a whiskey, or are you tired?" I stared at the ceiling for about 10 seconds. I replied, "You can come up." He came up. 30 minutes later, he was in the living room of my suite in a wrinkled white shirt, no jacket, holding an empty glass. He didn't sit. He went to the window and stood there looking at the Tagus. "Why do you speak Portuguese, Tessa?" I'd prepared that answer 15 years ago, since the first time anyone in college asked me the same thing. My grandmother is Portuguese. I spent a few summers with her when I was a kid. "Where?" "In Alfama, a few blocks from here." He turned his head. He kept waiting, like someone expecting more. I didn't give him more. He accepted it, without pressing, and went back to looking at the river. That's when his phone, which he'd left on the coffee table, lit up. The screen showed the full name, big, as if the device knew what it was doing. Cordelia Vance. I saw it. He saw me see it. He crossed the room in 3 steps, flipped the screen face down without answering, and stood next to the table like he'd forgotten what he was talking about. I hadn't forgotten. Who's Cordelia? I asked. He took one breath. Ex-fiancé. How long ago? 3 years. Does she still call you? Every now and then. I never pick up. I nodded. I didn't push further, but I filed it away. I filed away the speed with which he'd crossed the room. Filed away the 3 years said without a single emotional comma. Filed away the fact that he hadn't given me her last name on his own. The phone had given it. He went back to talking about something else. About a grandmother of his who'd lived in Paris in the 60s. About a book he'd read at 15 and found unbearable. About the meeting he'd had the night before with the Portuguese investor. I listened with half my brain, because the other half was marking the name Cordelia Vance with a colored pencil inside my head. At some point we ended up on the balcony. November air in Lisbon is cold, but less cold than in New York. The Tagus was black down below, with the lights from the south bank flickering on top of the water, and a lit-up cargo ship in the middle of the darkness, headed somewhere I didn't know. He stood next to me, leaning on the stone railing. His arm brushed mine by accident. I didn't move away. The project is going to work out, Tessa. It will. And after? After what, Rhett? He didn't answer. He turned to me, brushed a strand of hair away from my face, and his finger lingered on my chin 2 seconds longer than it needed to. Neither of us spoke. He kissed me. The kiss was short, intense, controlled by him, for 2 seconds, and then not anymore. His hand landed on the back of my neck. Our breathing grew heavy between us. My body responded before my brain did, which was a new problem. I was the kind of woman whose brain arrived first at everything. I pulled my face back an inch. Rhett, what are we doing? I don't know. Then we stop. I don't want to stop. Neither do I. But we stop. He took a deep breath. His hand moved from the back of my neck to my shoulder, then to my arm, then settled on my wrist. He waited another 3 seconds before letting go. I went back inside. I went to the bedroom, closed the door without slamming it. About 5 minutes later, I heard the suite door open and close on the other side, and then silence. I lay down, stared at the white ceiling of the 4 Seasons. The window was cracked open and the wind carried in the sound of distant music from some bar still open in Chiato down below, a fado. I couldn't make out the whole lyric, just a word here and there, but the woman's voice singing it was one of those that hurts even when you don't understand. I pulled the comforter up to my chin, closed my eyes. He had the chance to keep going and stopped. Why? And before I could answer, because I wasn't going to answer today, I thought of something else, more uncomfortable. Why didn't the name Cordelia Vance come out of his mouth as easily as 3 years? Chapter 4. Plaza. Monday, 9 at night. The city was at November temperature, the kind that cuts your face if you stand on a corner for more than 30 seconds. I left the office at 9:10 with my coat buttoned up to the last button and found the black car waiting in front of the lobby's revolving door, with the same driver in a cap who'd taken me to Il Mulino 2 weeks earlier. L'Artusi was in Tribeca, on a side street with 3 restaurants and a closed flower shop. The maitre d' led us up to a private terrace on the 2nd floor, heat lamp high on the wall, artificial ivy hiding the security cameras from the press. Rhett was already sitting down. Black jacket, white shirt, 2 buttons undone, ring on his pinky. I noticed the ring for the first time, and then I noticed it wasn't a wedding band. It was a signet ring with a crest worn down by time. "You came," he said. "I came. You thought I'd canceled. No, you did. A little." He pulled the chair out for me with his fingertips, without getting up from his own. I sat and pretended I hadn't noticed. Officially, it was a dinner to wrap up project details. There was a folder between us, with contracts, the Lisbon schedule, the budget revised after my correction with Mr. Medeiros. The folder stayed closed. The waiter brought wine. The wine went barely touched. Neither of us had managed a full week without seeing the other, and we both knew it without needing to say it. "How was the afternoon meeting?" I asked. "Long. Yours?" Martin asked me for an extra projection. I delivered it. "How long did it take you?" 40 minutes. Did he think it was good? He thought it was uncomfortable. He laughed quietly. A short laugh, shoulders still, the kind almost no one ever sees. "Do you like making older men uncomfortable, Tessa?" "I like hitting deadlines. The rest is a consequence." The waiter brought the appetizers. Pumpkin ravioli for me, carpaccio for him. The conversation drifted for a few minutes about nothing. The new building going up on 10th Avenue, the subway strike that had trapped Juno for 40 minutes the week before, the fact that Kavanaugh had asked to leave the Lisbon team for personal reasons, which I translated as, My pride can't handle the analyst who corrected me twice. It was during the main course that he dropped his guard. I didn't even see it coming. He was talking about a trip to Italy. And suddenly his voice changed, just a little, a degree lower than it had been all night, the final vowels of each word opening just slightly more. My mother took me to Florence when I was 16. I set down my fork. Just the two of you? Just the two of us. My father couldn't go. She said she'd managed to get the passport in time and that if we waited for my father, we'd grow old first. I smiled. Was she like that? She was. My mother had that kind of humor that sounded like a comment but was an order. She told me I was too calm for my own good. She told me that in Florence, at a restaurant near the Ponte Vecchio, after her second glass of Chianti. She must have been fun. She was a lot of things. Fun made the list, but it wasn't the first. He stopped, looked at his own plate, picked up the napkin, touched it to his mouth, set it back on his lap with the precision of someone raised by a very strict person. I didn't interrupt. I didn't ask about her death. I didn't ask anything. My grandmother Lourdes had taught me something, sitting in her kitchen in Queens, when I was 13, and my mother had just died. When somebody opens up, you don't fill the space with questions. You stay quiet and let the person choose what fits. I lifted my hand, rested it on top of his, on the table, 3 seconds, then pulled it back. He looked at me like no one had done that to him in a very long time. Thank you for telling me that, Rhett. He just nodded. His throat moved once. He couldn't answer. I went back to the ravioli and pretended I hadn't noticed. The rest of dinner was light. We talked about movies, about a restaurant in Lisbon he wanted to take me to on our next trip, about Juno's stubborn habit of sending me photos of shoes I didn't need. He dropped me off at home at 11:30. Didn't come up. Just said, before the car pulled away, Wednesday I want to see you. Wednesday I'm working late. Saturday then. Saturday what? Saturday there's a charity gala at the plaza. Devereux Group is one of the sponsors. You're coming with me. Is that an invitation or a notice? Both. I slammed the car door, climbed the 4 flights, closed the door of my apartment, and for the first time in 10 days, I didn't slide to the floor. Wednesday, 2 in the afternoon, I went down to the corporate archive in the building's basement to pull old documentation on a Devereux project in Madrid, which Rhett had asked me for as a reference for the Lisbon one. The archive took up half the basement, numbered gray metal shelves, fluorescent lighting, the smell of paper without mildew because the company spent more on humidity control than my entire apartment cost. Sullivan was there. Striped shirt, sleeves folded at the elbows, glasses on the tip of his nose, a folder open on one of the tables. He looked up when I walked in. Miss Holloway, Mr. Marsh, Rhett asked me to send you the Madrid references. He asked me to come get them. He asked us both. It's right here. He pulled a folder from the pile, put it in my hand. I thanked him. He went back to his documents. I actually turned toward the door and stopped, because he'd started speaking again, in a lower voice, without looking up. She's back as an outside consultant to the board. I turned around. Who? Cordelia Vance. Aunt Odette's decision. Rhett doesn't know yet. I stood there with the folder in my hand. Sullivan, why are you telling me this? He finally took off his glasses. His eyes without the glasses were a little more tired than his voice. Because I think you need to know a few things beforehand. He hasn't told you about his mother's funeral, has he? No. Then I'll say just one thing. When he tells you, listen all the way through. Don't interrupt. He put his glasses back on, went back to looking at his documents, and said nothing more. I understood the conversation was over. I also understood, in a small place in the middle of my chest, that Sullivan Marsh was a man who had been protecting Rhett Devereux for a long time, and that, from the way he had spoken to me, I was maybe the first person besides him to receive that protection. I left the archive and went up to the coffee room on 41, poured a coffee, sat at a corner table, and opened my laptop. I went to the company's internal database. I typed 3 words in the search field, Devereux Funeral Cordelia. The tool returned 3 results. One was an administrative note. Another was Rhett's calendar from 3 years ago, marked absent, family bereavement. The third was a screenshot of a society column item that had been published on a gossip site, deleted 3 hours later, and preserved by the group's legal team as follow-up material. I opened it. I read it. On the same day the Devereux heir buried his mother, his fiancée was seen leaving the couple's Manhattan building, accompanied by the CEO's best friend. Sources close to the family confirmed the engagement was broken off on the same day as the funeral. The note didn't have a photo. It didn't need one. Cordelia's name was written twice in the text. I closed the laptop, drank the cold coffee in one gulp. I spent 3 minutes staring at the exposed brick wall of the coffee room and thought about 2 things at the same time. The first, that Rhett made a lot more sense after reading that, The second, that Sullivan was right to ask me not to interrupt when Rhett told me, because I was going to interrupt by instinct, and interrupting was the worst thing I could do. I went back to my cubicle, put the Madrid folder in the drawer, didn't mention any of it to anyone. That night, Juno called me on speaker while I was doing the dishes. "Tess, I know you're dating him. All of Manhattan is talking. I saw a photo of you in a blue dress last week and almost passed out in the office. I need to know, is he a good kisser?" "Juno, for God's sake, answer." "He is." Tessa, is that a comfortable good kisser or a, I forgot my own social security number good kisser?" "Juno, answer. I forgot my social security number." Juno screamed so loud I pulled the phone away from the speaker and let the dishes rest in the sponge for 30 seconds, because I couldn't keep washing without laughing. My best friend is dating the most unreachable CEO in the city. I need to go to therapy tomorrow. "Juno, we're not dating. It's complicated." "Tessa, complicated people don't send you a car to pick you up in Tribeca. Either you're dating him or you're an executive assistant. Pick one." I hung up without picking. Saturday, 7 in the evening. The dress box arrived at my apartment at 4 in the afternoon. Valentino, black, backless, tag still attached. A short note inside, in his handwriting. "No need to return it. R." I put it on. Juno FaceTimed me while I was finishing my makeup. Her in pajamas on her apartment couch. Me in front of the bathroom mirror. "Tess, you look gorgeous. I'm going to cry." "Juno, don't cry. I will. I have the right. My friend was raised in Queens, and now she's going to the plaza in Valentino. I have the right." The car arrived at 7:30. The driver opened the door for me. I went up 5th Avenue to the plaza with the feeling of someone going to a test they hadn't studied for. Rhett had said he was going straight from the office, so we were meeting there. The plaza had a short red carpet at the entrance, 6 photographers with big cameras, a doorman in a blue suit who opened the door for me. I walked into the ballroom, and the first thing I saw was him, across the room, up on the platform that served as the stage, talking to 2 men in suits, white shirt without a tie, dark jacket, hair combed back. He saw me, gave that discreet 2-finger wave, the one only the person it's meant for understands, and went back to paying attention to the 2 men. I grabbed a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. 3 socialites looked me over from head to toe. I lifted my chin and pretended I hadn't noticed. That's when she showed up. I recognized her before the introduction. Blonde. The kind of blonde that only comes from a very expensive salon. Tight red dress. A smile that matched the light of any camera lens. Cordelia Vance crossed the ballroom toward Rhett, as if the path had always been hers. She got close, greeted 2 of the guests by name, and then approached him, gave him 2 kisses, one at each corner of his mouth. Rhett didn't pull away, but he didn't smile either. He said something short to her, his mouth almost closed, and she laughed as if he'd made a joke. 3 people around them thought it was a joke, from the way they looked. I turned my face away, took a sip of the champagne that tasted like nothing, headed to the ladies' room, because I needed to breathe somewhere away from the eyes of those 3 socialites who kept watching me. The plaza's ladies' room was bigger than my living room. White marble, gold mirrors, absurdly expensive perfume in the air. 2 women were touching up their lipstick at the mirror on the left. I walked in, opened my bag, took out mine. The door opened again. I didn't need to look at the mirror to know. Cordelia stopped next to me, opened her bag, took out her own lipstick. Tom Ford, blood red, the kind I'd never had the nerve to buy. She stepped up to the mirror, uncapped the tube calmly, started applying. It was within that calm that she spoke. "You're very beautiful, darling." Her voice was low, polite, almost affectionate. The 2 socialites touching up their lipstick stopped moving, even though they pretended they hadn't. "Thank you," I said. "I need to warn you about something. Woman to woman." She closed the tube with a click, turned 3/4 of the way toward me, didn't look me in the eye, looked at me through the mirror's reflection. Rhett always picks a pretty one before coming back to me. It's happened 3 times already. I don't want you getting hurt thinking this time is different. The silence in the bathroom thickened. One of the socialites set her mascara down on the sink and pretended to be looking for something in her bag. I closed my lipstick with the same calm she'd used. Put it in my bag. I looked at her through the mirror, not at myself. "Miss Vance." My voice came out lower than hers. "I appreciate the warning. I'd also like to warn you about something. I know what you did on the day of his mother's funeral. I have the article saved. If I were you, I'd stay away." Cordelia froze. Her face didn't change right away. It changed in 3 beats. First the chin, then the corner of the mouth, then the eyes. The blood red of the lipstick got even redder against the color that had drained out of her. The 2 socialites exchanged a glance through the mirror. One of them grabbed her bag and almost ran out. The other pretended to be washing her hand in slow motion. I turned, walked out of the bathroom, crossed the corridor with my heels clicking on the marble, and stepped back into the main ballroom with my spine so straight it hurt. Rhett saw me before I even saw him. He cut through the crowd with urgency, took my hand firmly, and turned me to face him. "What happened, Tessa?" "Not now, Rhett. Did something happen with her?" "Not now." He didn't let go of my hand. On the contrary, he started walking, pulled me with him, and I only realized once we reached the center of the ballroom that he wasn't taking me to a corner. He was taking me toward a thin man in a gray suit with a notebook in his hand, whom I recognized from the Society column. Henry Whitaker, Society reporter for the Post. "Henry," Rhett said. "Rhett, meet Tessa Holloway, my girlfriend. You can publish it." I didn't have time to breathe. The flash of Whitaker's photographer went off in our faces. Another one. Rhett kept holding my hand. He didn't look at me. He looked at Henry, said my name again, spelled out the last name, Holloway, 2 L's, and only then turned his face in my direction. I smiled at Henry like someone who had been trained their whole life for it. I hadn't been trained for anything. Inside, it was anger and panic in equal parts, and my brain was making 3 lists at once. The things I was going to say to Rhett in the car, the things I wasn't going to say, and the exact order for each. The car took 15 minutes to go from the plaza to his building on Central Park West. Rhett didn't let go of my hand from the ballroom to the car. He let go when the door closed. I leaned against the window. He leaned against the other side. The driver didn't ask where to. He already knew. He spoke first. "Say something, Tessa." I looked at the city passing by on the other side of the tinted glass. The neon lights of Columbus Avenue smeared into lines on the window, and I answered only what I could without exploding. "When we get there." Chapter 5. The Whole Truth. His penthouse was on the 22nd floor of a pre-war building on Central Park West, facing Strawberry Fields. I had never set foot in there. The doorman recognized me from some photo I didn't know existed. The elevator went up without stopping, with the key Rhett put into the panel, and the doors opened directly into the living room. The entire apartment was floor-to-ceiling glass on one wall. On the other side of the glass, Central Park was a long black smudge, cut through by lit-up paths. The lights of Fifth Avenue flickered on the far side of the park. It was 1:11 in the morning. I took off my heels at the door. I put them on the rug, side by side, the way I did at home. I crossed the living room barefoot on the cold wood floor. I felt the cold in my heel and was grateful for it, because it was the only real thing in the room. Rhett stayed standing near the door. He hadn't taken off his jacket. One hand was in his pants pocket, his chin slightly lifted, and he was waiting. I knew that posture. It was the same as the man who decided people's fates in 30 seconds. Only now he was waiting for me to decide his. I turned to him. "Rhett, I need you to give me the whole truth. Now. Not the press version. Not Sullivan's version. The truth you've never told anyone. If you don't tell me now, I'm leaving, and will stay only in newspaper articles." He took a step back. Just one. He went to the bar, pulled the cap off the whiskey bottle but didn't pour. He held the cap in his hand for too long, then put it back without a sound, turned to me. "Give me 5 minutes. I'll give you as long as you need, but you talk." He took off his jacket, folded it over the back of the couch carefully, as if the jacket were the last thing he still had control over. He sat on one of the 2 gray leather couches that faced each other. I sat on the other. The coffee table between us was an antique, dark wood, with a single unlit candle in the middle. He started slowly. "Cordelia Vance was my fiancée for 2 years. We met in Aspen, a week of skiing when I was 30. She was 27. The families knew each other. The engagement was a matter of time. My mother liked her. I liked her enough. Keep going. My mother got sick 3 months before the wedding. Pancreatic cancer. She lasted 6 months. She died on a Tuesday, in a hospital on the Upper East Side, with her hand in mine. I didn't interrupt. Even when his throat moved once and he stopped for about 3 seconds. The wake was Wednesday, the burial Thursday. Cordelia was at both. She stood next to me at the cemetery, held my hand, cried as much as was acceptable to cry. Thursday afternoon, after the burial, after everyone left, I went home. To the apartment that was ours, that was mine. I opened the door. I went to the bedroom because I needed to take off the black suit, and the bedroom door was closed. I opened it. I felt my breathing go shallow. I didn't speak. Cordelia was on the bed, with my best friend at the time, a guy who had been the best man in the engagement. I stood in the doorway for about 10 seconds. She saw me. He saw me. I didn't shout, Tessa. I didn't hit anyone. I didn't make a scene. I just said, "Leave in 15 minutes." And I closed the door, and I went down to the living room, and I sat in the armchair until I heard them both go down in the elevator. "Rhett, wait." I need to say this all at once, he breathed. I didn't hit anyone because I had just buried my mother that morning. I didn't have the strength for anything more that day. I'd never told that to anyone, not even Sullivan. Sullivan knows because he was standing outside the building and saw the two of them leave through the lobby. He called me 2 hours later, and I didn't pick up. He came up. He slept on the couch that night. He never asked me what had happened. He just stayed. I blinked twice. I had to blink, because if I didn't, I was going to cry, and I didn't want to cry yet. He stopped talking, ran his hand down his face, lingering on his forehead. When he started again, his voice was hoarser, and he didn't look at me. After that, He stopped again, took a deep breath. I watched his chest rise once, fall, and his throat swallow dry. Sorry, I don't know how to say this. Try. I spent 3 years doing fake relationships. None lasted more than 6 weeks. None were real. It was just to stop the society column from asking if I was ready to get married again, if Cordelia had been the reason, if I needed help. Aunt Odette and Cordelia were the only 2 people who thought it was a phase. Aunt thought I'd go back to Cordelia when I woke up. Cordelia thought the same, for other reasons. All of those women knew it was for show. I never lied to them about it. I never touched any of them in a way that would have hurt, but I never touched any of them in a way that, he searched for the word, didn't find it, that mattered either. I don't know if I know how. And the spreadsheet? I said, before thinking. He looked up. A small line appeared at the corner of his mouth. The spreadsheet? The spreadsheet I made, of the women from the last 3 months. The redhead, the brunette, the spreadsheet. He almost smiled. It was the saddest smile I'd seen on him. Of the women on your spreadsheet, Tessa, I kissed 2. I had dinner with all of them. I slept with 0. It was all just photos leaving restaurants. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know if it was relief or if it was worse. And the gala, I said. Tonight. He took a deep breath. I announced it to the press without asking you because I was scared, Tessa. When I saw Cordelia talking to you in the ballroom, when you came out of the bathroom with that face, I knew right then that she'd done something. I knew I was going to lose you if I didn't do something immediately. I did the wrong thing. I know I did. You had the right to decide when and how. I took that from you. I stood up from the couch. It wasn't a decision. It was my body responding before my brain, like in the elevator disaster 2 weeks earlier, except now in the opposite direction. I crossed the living room to the entryway, stopped next to my heels on the rug, and stood there, with my back to him, staring at the door. I could leave. The doorman recognized me. A cab on Central Park West was 5 minutes away. I had the Valentino dress on, my bag on the chair, my phone charged. I had everything I needed to leave and never walk through that door again. I didn't hear him move. He didn't follow me. He didn't say anything. He just stayed where he was. And that silence was the bravest thing he'd done all night, because any man used to running a boardroom would have called me back with 3 ready-made lines, and he didn't. I stood there for too long. I counted 3 breaths. On the 3rd, I realized anger wasn't the strongest thing inside me anymore. It was exhaustion, and something underneath the exhaustion I still didn't want to name. I turned around, went back to the couch, didn't sit. I stood on the other side of the coffee table, barefoot on the cold floor, because I needed the cold to think. Rhett, you did this wrong. I know. You exposed me. You decided for me something that was mine to decide. I could have said no. I know. If you do this again, one more time, I'm leaving, and I'm not coming back. I want you to hear me say that now, because I'm not going to repeat it later. I'm listening. I breathed, closed my eyes for 3 seconds, opened them. But I understand why. He looked at me like he hadn't heard right. I understand why, I repeated. And I'm not leaving tonight. I was going to leave if you just lied to me now. You didn't lie. Thank you. He closed his eyes, didn't speak. He stood up from the couch slowly, like someone asking permission with his body. The coffee table stayed between us for another second, and then he walked around it in 2 steps and stopped in front of me. But I didn't let him touch me yet. I lifted my hand, rested it on his chest, at the level of his shirt collar, and spoke first. But I need to tell you something, Rhett. If your aunt and Cordelia are going to come after me, I need to know in advance. I need to be at your side, not behind you. You can't protect me by hiding things from me. Never again. He put his hand over mine, on top of his chest. Never again. Promise me. I promise. He rested his forehead against mine. He didn't kiss me. He just stayed there, breathing at the same distance I was breathing, and I felt him tremble once in the shoulder. Just once, almost nothing, and I pretended I hadn't felt it so he wouldn't have to admit it. Tessa, tell me. I might do this wrong again. Not on purpose, but I might. I know. I don't know how this is done. I don't know either, Rhett. He breathed deeply against my forehead. I want to learn. I know that too. He kissed me. Slowly. No rush. It wasn't the Lisbon kiss, the one he'd controlled for 2 seconds and then hadn't. It was another one. It was after the truth. It was a choice. He took me by the hand and led me down the hallway to the bedroom. He didn't turn on the light. The only light came from the city, coming in through the entire glass wall. His bedroom was huge, silent, and for the first time that night I could hear my own breathing. He stopped in front of the bed, put his hand on my face, looked at me as if he were deciding something he had already decided a long time ago. "Tessa, if you don't want this, we stop now. I want this, Rhett." He slid the zipper of the dress down slowly. The fabric fell and made a soft sound on the wood floor. I started undoing the buttons of his shirt. My hands were shaking. I noticed at the third button that his were shaking too. That caught me off guard. The marble man was trembling, and that's what changed everything for me. He pulled me close. His skin was warm, warmer than I expected, like he'd run to get there. His mouth on my neck, then on my shoulder, then behind my ear, where I didn't even know I was sensitive. He laid me on the bed carefully, as if I might break. I pulled him down on top of me and whispered, "I'm not going to break." He almost laughed against my skin. He kissed me again, deeper, his body on top of mine. The heat, the pressure of his weight, which I hadn't expected to be that much and to feel that good. I closed my eyes and felt every inch of his skin against mine, his chest against mine, his thigh between mine, the smell of expensive soap and whiskey mixed that had been his since the first night. He took his time. He kissed my neck, my collarbone, went down along the curve of my breast, lingered there with a patience that made me dig my fingers into the sheet. He went lower, his mouth on my hip bone, then on the inside of my thigh, lingering on purpose, like someone who knew exactly how long I could hold on before asking. I held on for less than I thought I could. My hand went to his hair before I realized it was moving. I pulled. He came back up. He kissed me again, breathing heavy, his hand moving down my body, stopping where I needed it to stop and staying there until I forgot to close my mouth. I heard a sound come out of me I hadn't heard before. He heard it too. His forehead touched mine for a second, like he needed to steady himself, and I noticed, for the first time, that his control was slipping right along with mine. For the first time since I'd met him, Rhett Devereaux wasn't in a hurry for anything, but he also had no way out anymore. When he entered me, I held my breath. He stopped, looked at me. "Okay, don't stop." He kept going, slowly at first, then deeper. I held his face with both hands and made him look at me. I wanted to see. I wanted to know it was him, that it was with me, that it was real. His eyes stayed on me the whole time. "Tessa, I'm here." He closed his eyes for a second and opened them again, whispered, with his mouth against my ear, "I'm not going to let you leave." The rhythm picked up. I clung to him. He held me up with his forearm under my back, the other hand on my hip, and I felt his sweat on my shoulder. I came first. He came right after. We stayed still, breathing together, him still on top of me, heart beating against heart. He rolled onto his side, pulled me close to him, my head on his chest, his hand in my hair. "Rhett? Yeah, you are made of flesh, after all." He laughed quietly. For the first time since I'd met him, it was a whole laugh. I lay there, his breathing settling beneath my ear, and my brain started to shut down bit by bit, like a house turning off its lights one by one. But before the last one went off, a question flickered, still without a shape, something he had said earlier in the living room, when he'd talked about Aunt Odette like someone talks about a person who was still on the other side. His voice had hung a second longer on Aunt than on Cordelia, and I had registered it without meaning to. I kept it. For tomorrow. Chapter 6. Coffee and a Saved Question. Sunday, 10:02 in the morning. Light was coming in through the bedroom window at the height of the bed and landing on top of his pillow. I woke up with his hand on my waist and noticed before opening my eyes that he'd already been awake for a while, because his breathing no longer had the deep rhythm of sleep. I opened my eyes. He was lying on his side, head resting on his arm, looking at me, shirtless, hair messy, a faint pillow crease at the corner of his face. For the first time since I'd met him, there was no armor on his body, not the boss's, not the work dinner man's, not the CEO's on the plaza platform. "Good morning, Rhett." "Good morning, Tessa." I laughed into the pillow, because the situation was absurd, and because I didn't know what to do with a good morning said that way. He pulled me closer. We stayed quiet for a minute. It was a good silence, the kind that doesn't ask for anything, that just stays. I got up first. He watched me without moving. I grabbed his white shirt from the floor, the one I'd unbuttoned one button at a time the night before, and put it on. The shirt came down to the middle of my thigh. I buttoned 3 middle buttons and left the rest alone. "That shirt looks better on you than on me," he said. "You should thank me then." "Thank you. Anytime." I left the bedroom before he could get up, crossed the hallway to the living room. The Sunday sun came in through the entire glass wall and made the wood floor shine. I headed to the kitchen, an open space, integrated with the living room, with a long marble counter and an Italian espresso machine so elaborate it looked like a small airplane engine. He came after me, in gray sweatpants, barefoot, shirtless. He stopped on the other side of the counter, put both hands on it, and looked at me like someone observing his own kitchen for the first time in a very long time. "I'll make you a coffee. You know how to make coffee?" He looked at the machine, then looked at me, then looked at the machine again. "I know how to make coffee. Anything else?" He pressed his lips together, held his shoulders up for a second, took a deep breath, and then made a confession with the seriousness of someone talking about debts. "I only know how to make coffee, Tessa." I laughed. I laughed out loud. I laughed with my hand over my mouth, leaning forward over the counter, because I couldn't believe that Rhett Devereaux, who ran 11 five-star hotels in Manhattan, had just admitted he didn't know how to fry an egg. "What do you mean, just coffee? I've never cooked anything in my life. I always had people who cooked. You're 34 years old. I know. Rhett, that's a gap in your development as a human being. I know." He looked at me, laughing that whole laugh again, the one that had cost years to come out, and I stopped laughing because I realized, for the second time in 12 hours, that laugh hadn't existed for anyone else in the last 3 seasons of his life. I rested my chin on my hand, and he started making the coffee, with the seriousness of someone taking an oral exam. He served it in 2 white handleless mugs, the Japanese kind, handed one to me across the counter, picked up his, nodded his head toward the terrace, and I followed. The penthouse terrace looked out over all of Central Park. From up there, the park was a long green rug, with dirt paths tracing curves, the small lake glinting in the corner, and the silhouette of the east side buildings on the other side. The November air was cold, but the sun was at an angle that hit the terrace directly, warming the stone floor. I sat in one of the black painted iron chairs. He sat in the other, stretched out his legs, rested his mug on the arm of the chair. His shirt, which I was wearing, came down to the middle of my thigh, and I crossed one leg over the other to stay warmer. "Next steps," he said. "The press is going to try to follow you for a few days, maybe a week. I already have security set up for that. You don't need to worry about anything. Just tell me if anyone gets close." "Okay." And the project continues. "You stay on Lisbon if you want." "I want to. I didn't want you to feel obligated." "I don't. I want the project." He took a sip of his coffee. His profile against the park was exactly what it was. A man who, for the first time in a long while, was drinking a Sunday coffee without thinking about anything waiting for him. That's when his voice changed a little, a degree lower, almost nothing. I only noticed because I'd learned to decode changes in degrees of his voice in 3 weeks. "Aunt Odette is going to want to meet you, Tessa. Soon." I held the mug with both hands, looked at Central Park, took 2 seconds to answer. "Okay, I'll meet her whenever you want." He looked at me. He seemed about to say something. I waited. He opened his mouth, closed it, changed the subject. "Do you want to have lunch here, or go out to eat?" "I want to stay here." "Good." I saved the good. I saved, more than anything, the subject change. His phone, which was on the table between us, buzzed. The screen lit up. I saw the name before he did. Sullivan. He grabbed it, unlocked it, read the message, and turned the screen toward me without comment. The message said, "Tell her I approve." I laughed. "Approve of what?" "You. Tell Sullivan I haven't approved of him yet." Rhett typed slowly, with that thumb of a man who didn't type fast because he had people who typed for him, and turned the screen again before sending. The message was identical to what I had said. I gave him a thumbs up. He sent it. The reply came in 3 seconds. He turned the screen one more time. "Fair." I laughed quietly. He smiled at the corner of his mouth, in that way that didn't show his teeth. His mug was resting on his knee. My foot was resting on the side of his chair without me having noticed it was. I didn't move it. That's when my phone rang. Juno, obviously. I put it on speaker before thinking. Juno screamed before the speaker even finished connecting. "Tessa Holloway, you are on the cover of the Post. I have the photo on my phone. I'm going to frame it. I'm putting it in the office. I'm putting it in my mother's kitchen." Rhett, with his eyes closed in the sun, almost split in half laughing. Only his shoulders shook once. He didn't make a sound. "Juno," I said. "What?" Rhett is here listening to all of this. Silence on the other end. 3 seconds of silence that Juno hadn't managed in 10 years of friendship. I looked at Rhett, who was still with his eyes closed, with that half smile. He opened one eye, looked at me, and closed it again. "Rhett is listening to all of this? Tess, I'll call you later. Mr. Devereaux, it's a pleasure to meet you over speakerphone. I'm Juno Park, Tess's friend since Cornell. I have an impeccable medical resume. Please disregard the screaming. Pleasure, Juno, Rhett said, still with his eyes closed. Juno hung up. I stared at the phone screen for about 10 seconds. Rhett opened his eyes. He spoke without turning his face. Is she always like that? Worse. That was the toned-down version. Is she a doctor? Dermatologist? God bless her patients. God bless them, yes. We stayed on the terrace for another hour. At some point, I got up and went over to him. I sat on his knees with my legs dangling off to the side and rested my hand on his face. He closed his eyes at the touch, just like that, like a cat that hadn't been petted in a long time. And I noticed, in a very specific place in my chest, that Rhett Devereaux was the kind of man who hadn't had anyone do that to him in years. I thought, without saying, I chose. He chose. We start here. He opened his eyes. I'm going to take a shower. Okay. You'll be here when I come back. Question or order? Both. I'll be here. He kissed my forehead and went inside. I stayed on the terrace alone. Central Park was still long and green down below. A boy was crossing it on a bicycle. A couple was walking hand in hand down the main path. The coffee mug was cold in my hand. That's when the question came back. It had been planted since the early morning hours, from the moment he'd mentioned Aunt Odette in the same breath as Cordelia, and the weight had landed wrong on the word aunt. And now, again, he'd changed the subject when the aunt had come up in the conversation. I took a deep breath, looked at the park. I let the question form in full, because it deserved to be articulated. He talked about his aunt in a different way. When he said she wants to meet me, his voice shifted a little. I don't know why. I put the mug on the table, smiled to myself, saved the question for later. Today was Sunday. The sun was good. The man I had once called Marble was taking a shower in the next room. Today was enough, but I was going to ask. Just not today. Hey, Kay here. That's it for book 1. But guess what? Book 2 is already done. You can grab access to it for just a small fee. I walked into his penthouse already knowing I'd leave there different. I just didn't imagine I'd leave behind not only a key, but the version of me that still believed love and control could walk together. Rhett tried to explain, tried to say he'd done it all to protect me. But it was too late. Because when a man decides a woman's fate without looking her in the eyes first, he isn't saving anything. He's destroying everything. I left that same night. The next morning, I boarded a flight to Lisbon determined to start over from scratch. And as I crossed the ocean trying to erase the man who still lived inside me, Rhett was about to set his own world on fire to try to prove to me that this time, he'd walk through the flames with me. Not for me. But when he finally reached me, even if I still loved him, would that be enough for me to go back? Like I said, that was just a taste of book 2. To watch it uncensored, just click on the first link here in the pinned comment. I'll see you on the other side in a few seconds. Remember, just click on the first link down here in the comments, and book 2 complete, no ads, no interruptions, will already be available for you. It's very simple. Book 2 is something I'm loving making. You're loving it too, so I promise there will be more. It's where you find increasingly spicy stories, a true dark romance. And precisely because this version is getting more and more heated, the video isn't well accepted publicly on YouTube. This closed environment is where I can actually share my essence and where I feel free to do my best work for you. More news coming soon. I'll be waiting for you on the other side. Unfortunately, many people have been downloading our audio, effectively copying the entire story, and simply reposting it on YouTube. If you want to watch the original story and be the first to catch the upcoming ones, look for Kay's Sweet Love on YouTube for the best billionaire and CEO romance content. Remember, the official channels are Kay's Sweet Love on YouTube and the My Stories platform. I'll be waiting for you there. With love, Kay.